Joining the show right now, a man who knows all things collectibles, Buster Scher, joining the show right now on the Mercedes-Benz Vans phone line. Buster, thanks so much, dude, for making some time. When did you start to really dive deep into the collectibles game?
First up, thanks for having me. Got into the collectibles game very early on, New York sports, and then when I started getting into the real fun stuff, during the pandemic.
I feel like you dive deeper than just sports. When you say the real fun stuff, you've now unlocked like a completely different box.
Yeah, how I define real fun stuff is museum quality assets. So everything from signatures and documents from the first presidents, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln in particular, dinosaur fossils from 100 million years plus, Type 1 photos of the Titanic being constructed, things that could actually be in a museum. That's how I define the real fun stuff.
Buster, I wish you could have seen the look on Brockman's face when you said museum quality assets, and he just was like, oh, okay, this is serious.
I was like,
now.
We're going to the next level here. Buster.
Yeah, this is the fun stuff. That's what Buster was ready. Prefaced it well. When it comes to sports fun stuff, what's some of the fun stuff you've crossed paths with in the world of sports collectibles? It's kind of next level.
The stuff that you see making the headlines are the top rookie cards. So let's say a one-of-one Giannis National Treasures logo man that has a fun story behind it about how the person who originally bought it had a stain on the card. They paid a couple $1,000. Then they returned it for, I think it was $3,000 that they paid. That card recently sold for a few million, but they returned it because it had a small stain, which, because it's a one-of-one, long-term didn't end up affecting the value. In the sports world, I think tickets are fun, especially to, games where people wouldn't have kept them. So let's say Michael Jordan hits a game winner at an opposing arena. Everybody would have thrown their tickets away because they weren't happy that the Bulls won. They were pissed off, so they threw that stuff out. Therefore, the populations of those sorts of tickets are super low. Those are the sorts of stories that really get me going.
I love it. Buster Scher joining the show, host of The Buster Show. Ben Lyons in for Rich on The Rich Eisen Show. We were talking about Tiger Woods walking off of the 18th hole at St. Andrews this morning, and he's saying goodbye to the fans, and his hat is in his hand, and I'm thinking, I wonder what Buster would pay for that hat. When you look at sports now, do you look at moments? You mentioned Jason Tatum scoring the final basket of Game 1 this year in the first round of the playoffs. How much is his jersey worth? Are you looking at sports through that lens?
Yeah, that's the lens that I watch sports through now. It's sort of impossible to turn that brain off once you see it. Every NBA game that's played, I'm friendly with the guys who have an auction partnership with the NBA. Most of the jerseys go directly to them and then get auctioned off. Players aren't even really allowed to keep their jerseys for the most part. So when I'm watching an NBA game, I'm like, oh, okay, that's, a couple $100,000 every quarter, even in a regular season game that people are willing to pay. Every jersey LeBron puts on is six figures automatically. That sort of stuff is crazy. And then when you get to big moments, the ancillary stuff is crazy. It really is.
Ben Lyons on for Rich on The Rich Eisen Show. Buster, I came across 450 Jose Canseco cards last weekend. What do I do with this?
450 Jose Canseco cards, probably not much. It's probably not worth getting graded. So I would just look at them and be happy. Unless they're rookies, and then maybe you sell them as a lot. But generally speaking, you don't want to waste your time and money on those sort of years.
Well, maybe I can do what Jose does and just go on Twitter and say that I'll be at a local car wash and I'll have them for sale. So that would be nice. What do I do with what does TJ do with some of the stuff that he has that's not for sale? But if, you can name your price.
Buster, I do have a question, something that just kind of popped into my head. It's not a sports memorabilia, but here's a question. Let's just say you have a really famous actress, right? And you happen to catch her garter belt at a wedding. What could that garner? It just now popped into my head that I have this item. Yeah.
It's difficult to say. It depends who it is and if there's anything else you can compare it to. So do they have other, let's say it's an actress. Are there significant movie props that have set record prices where you could draw some sort of a comparison on the name to. People who aren't in sports or, don't have a ton of props and things out there are very hard to price. Signatures are probably the easiest and lowest hanging fruit to compare things to, but something like that, it's all going to come down to whether you can comp it to anything and whether you can prove that it is what you say it is, whether there's video proof, you can photo match it. There are so many things that would go into it if you were to try to auction that in theory.
Okay.
Del Tufo, what do you got for Buster?
Question for you. I have about 500 concert tickets from the 70s, like late 70s, early 80s.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
I got a ton of them. Like, I'm talking like great, like from Live Aid to like big events going all through the like decade of the 80s and early 90s. Are they worth anything?
Who are the biggest names that you saw?
Oh, name them.
Uh-oh, Buster, you're asking Del Tufo to talk music in the 70s
Everybody.
and 80s. We might be here for a while. Yeah.
That's why I'm not, literally everybody. From like,
Yeah, the big ones you want to
like Pearl Jam, early 90s, like Unplugged, Nirvana.
That's gold right there, basically. The ticket market is up significantly in the last 2 years. So I would pick out the big ones, look for comps and auctions and eBay. If none exist, that means that it's even better for you. But if they do exist, you can get a rough idea of what they're worth. And the big ones you would send to PSA to get graded. And then, likely if you wanted to sell them, put them in an auction. But that's real money.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you just made his weekend.
Wow.
Look at that. There's a big smile on Del Tufo's
They're
face
going
there,
on
Buster.
safe now.
Chris, you got anything you're trying to sell?
Yeah, Buster. Obviously, the pandemic kind of helped bring all of this back. We saw the huge uptick in sports cards and everyone, going on Instagram and breaks and all that fun stuff. And like obviously Ken Golden and some of these other guys, everyone was chasing the LeBron triple logo man this past year until it finally got nailed. What do you think the sustainability of all of this is? Are we going to see some type of bubble burst like we're seeing with crypto this year, or just long-term it for us if you could?
Yeah, the way that I see this playing out is obviously, there's an inevitable correction, but I think we've already seen a lot of that, similar to how you have seen in pretty much every market around the world. But the thing is, when you look at what people under 30 want, it's the things that, are from their childhood. It's why Pokemon has hit the resurgence in the last couple of years and not in 2005. It's because the kids that were collecting in 1999 now have a little bit of money. So, I think that is sort of the way that I see it playing out over and over and over for every major category, every major franchise. And it's the things that people want. And since, these have been proven as real assets that have, historical track records, especially for the biggest names and industries, I think long term that interest is not going to disappear. Not in the giant brands.
No, the power of nostalgia is incredible. And Buster Scher joining the show, host of the Buster Show, sports collectible expert. Ben Lyons in for Rich on the Rich Eisen Show. The power of nostalgia to really draw consumer spending and to really inspire people to want to go out and build community around the things that mean something to them is unmatched. To make everyone in the room feel really old, Buster, go down memory lane. What were the things and who were the players that you watched as a kid growing up that made you that will make you nostalgic to want to collect their items as you get older?
Oh, it's terrible. You're setting me up for failure here. Obviously Derek Jeter. That, but I only became a Yankees fan in 2009 because I was 9. Fortunately, that was a good year. But it's Carmelo Anthony on the Knicks. I don't have that many good teams to lean on. I became a Giants fan a little bit after they were winning. But it's the superstars of the leagues that I watched. So it's still LeBron. It's, it was Kobe. It's funny now because of the way that certain characters from the past have become so much bigger than life, and, how things like, documentaries like The Last Dance totally revitalized the Michael Jordan collectability to a generation that never saw him play. I'm interested to see how that plays out in 20 years for people who never saw, LeBron James play, and the LeBron James documentary comes out and how that affects things. Those are the sorts of things that I'm thinking about too. But for me, it was always the New York sports teams.
Buster, what's next? So we can get out our pens and write this down so we can kind of get ahead of the curve and set up our portfolios here in the coming years.
Like I said, the thing that I believe in most, and it's the only thing that I can tell you for a fact is good, is museum quality assets. Things that could be in a museum. Private museums will pay 3 to 6% of asset value to hold it in their facilities and protect it on a annual basis. And those are the sorts of things. So you think Triceratops skeleton, you think Babe Ruth game-worn jersey. It's the top percent of the percent. Everything else is fun, and there's nostalgia. I would go for rarer stuff if that's what you're into. But collecting at the end of the day is supposed to be about fun and passion and building something that makes you happy.
And do you prefer?
It probably makes other people happy.
And do you prefer something tangible, something physical, or are you? What do you think about the NFT market?
Yeah, so I actually said this earlier to somebody. I prefer the NFT market today, where it is, I think, monthly volume is down over 70%. I prefer it today than when it was at its peak, because it's at its peak, there were lots of scams. Gas was, Ethereum gas for transactions was incredibly high. The price of everything was incredibly high, whereas now it's a lot easier to sort of tell who's in it for the long run. So I prefer digital collectibles today than a year ago. And in general, I think that they're, for the most part, a plus to the collectibles hobby.
Buster Scher joining the show. Museum quality assets. I like that. Del Tufo's going to be on the phone with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum in Cleveland when we're done with the show. Buster, I'll leave you with this one. Museum quality assets. You were in my office in New York. I saw you eyeing that Carmelo Anthony water bottle I stole from the Lakers bench this year. How much do you think that can go for?
I think you got a couple $100 right there if you can prove that it says.
Not for sale, Buster. It's priceless. Thanks so much for joining the show. Appreciate you, buddy.